Okay, good day. Welcome back. We missed everyone last week, but good to be back talking about Shabbos again. And today I want to discuss the language that we find in the Ten Commandments. Zachor es Yom HaShabbos l'kadsho. Remember the day of Shabbos to sanctify it. Now, part of this discussion, which we're not going to have today, is to compare the way the commandment of Shabbos appears in the Ten Commandments in Parshas Yisro, in the book of Shemos, in the book of Exodus, versus how it appears in Dvarim, Deuteronomy, Parshas Va'asnana, because there are a number of differences. One of them is on this very word, Zachor es Yom HaShabbos, remember the Shabbos. So in Dvarim, it says Shamor es Yom HaShabbos, guard the Shabbos. It doesn't say remember the Shabbos. And that is something that we certainly have to get into. But for today, I just want to focus on Zachor on its own without comparing it. So what does Zachor es Yom HaShabbos mean? What does it mean that we are commanded in the Ten Commandments? This is a big one, right? Remember the Shabbos. So what I want to do is start just on a pshat surface level and then move a little deeper and move towards what our sages teach us and practically how it plays out for us. So the commentaries who focus on the simple reading, the surface reading, the pshat, have a couple of suggestions. What does it mean? What is the commandment to remember the Shabbos? So the Rashbam, for example, says what it means is remember the Shabbos of creation. The commandment is to remember the Shabbos. What's the Shabbos? The Shabbos of the very first Shabbos, the Shabbos of creation. As actually, if you continue to read the commandment, it says, Zachor es Yom HaShabbos l'kadsho, remember the day of Shabbos to sanctify it. Ki sheishes yamim asa Hashem es hashamayim v'haaretz, because God created the heavens and the earth in 6 days, and He rested on the seventh day. So it directly brings us back to creation. So Zachor es Yom HaShabbos, remember the day of Shabbos means remember the Shabbos of the creation. That's the Rashbam's interpretation. Others, Ibn Ezra, and others, they say that the commandment to remember the Shabbos means keep count. Keep count of what day it is so that you can remember when Shabbos is. Right? If you think about it, there's really, other than keeping track of when Shabbos is, there's no need to have days of the week. It helps maybe as a reference point to be able to say what's going to happen on Sunday or Monday, Yom Rishon, Yom Sheni. But otherwise, do we really need days of the week? We could just have days of the month, the first day of the month, second day of the month, all the way up to 30, 31, however you want to divide up your months. We don't really need days of the week for anything. What function do days of the week serve? Where does this idea come from? So it's in order to remember when Shabbos is, because we do need days of the week, because there's one day that's unique. There's one day that's different and sanctified and above all other days, and it's every seventh day. So we need days of the week to be able to track when Shabbos is. So Zachor es Yom HaShabbos means remember the Shabbos means keep track of when Shabbos is. And of course, that's because we have to l'kadasho, we have to sanctify it. And we sanctify it through refraining from work, etc., and making kiddush. But the purpose, Zachor, means remember the Shabbos, meaning keep tracks that you know when Shabbos is. The Ramban, when he discusses this, he elaborates a little bit. He also discusses the same idea. He says the idea of Zachor on the simple level is that we should be constantly remembering when Shabbos is so that we don't forget when it's supposed to fall out and treat it like any other day. And but also you have the added benefit that if you are keeping track of when Shabbos is constantly, then you're really referencing Shabbos constantly. And we are constantly, daily reminding ourselves of the lessons of Shabbos, of God being creator of the world. We're always focused on Shabbos. And the Ramban actually points out that the way that in Judaism, we count days are by numbers. We don't have names for the days of the week. We don't have Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, things like that. We just have Yom Rishon, Yom Sheni, etc. And actually, in the morning, at the very end of the daily morning prayers, the end of Shacharis, we have inserted in. We have what we call the Shir Shel Yom, the song of the day. It's a chapter of Tehillim each day, and the way that we introduce it is Hayom Yom Rishon LeShabbat. This is from Shabbos. This is the first day since Shabbos, the second day since Shabbos, or toward Shabbos, depending on how you want to understand it. But either way, every day when we mention what day it is, we actually are mentioning it in reference to when Shabbos is, and so that's Zachor es Yom HaShabbos. Remember the Shabbos. According to this, it's not actually on Shabbos that we do Zachor, that we remember the Shabbos. It's actually every other day of the week that we remember the Shabbos, and we mention it, we count towards it, and that way we won't lose track. And that way also we'll remind ourselves of the messages of Shabbos every single day. Rashi, in his commentary on this pasuk, on this verse, mentions an idea from the Gemara, from the Midrash, and I put it on the source sheet. And Rashi says, this is the interpretation. Rashi says, the following is its meaning: take care to remember always the Sabbath day, the day of Shabbos, that if, for example, you come across a nice article of food during the week, put it by for the Shabbos. So how do you remember the Shabbos? It's not just in word, it's not just counting, it's not just keeping track of when Shabbos is. It's actually, we have to do something. It's still during the week. It's still something that we do during the week. It's not something we do on Shabbos. But what Rashi says it means is that we should always remember, always be preparing for it actively. And if we come across, we're in the store and we see something looks good, so we shouldn't say, oh, that looks good, let me have it now. We should say, that looks good, let me save that for Shabbos, because that's the day when we should enjoy the offerings of this world the most in order to enhance our Shabbos. Now, where did Rashi get this idea from? So this comes from a passage in the Gemara, in the Talmud, in Beitza, and it actually follows a dispute between Beis Shammai. Here it's quoted as Shammai and Hillel. Shammai the elder and Hillel the elder. And we'll read what the Gemara says, what the Talmud says over here. It says, it was talking about Brisa. They said about Shammai the elder that all his days he would eat in honor of Shabbos. Kol yamav haya ochel lichlot Shabbos. All his days he would eat in honor of Shabbos. Fascinating thing. If you think about it. Every day he would eat in honor of Shabbos. How so? So if he found a choice animal, some good meat, he would say, this is for Shabbos. If he subsequently found another one better than it, choicer than it, he would set aside the second one and eat the first. And so his eating of the first was in order to save the other one for Shabbos. So his eating was in honor of Shabbos. So every day he would be eating in honor of Shabbos, assuming he found it something better. I guess if he didn't find something better, then he wouldn't. But his eating during the week was in honor of Shabbos. However, Hillel the elder had a different trait, that all his actions were for the sake of heaven. As it is stated, blessed be the Lord day by day. Okay, skipping to the next part in the bold, that is also taught in a Brisa. Beis Shammai say, from the first day of the week, start preparing already for your Shabbos. And Beis Hillel say, blessed be the Lord day by day. So that Brisa means a different tradition from the sages. Here it's not actually the elders themselves, but rather their students, their academies being quoted. And the Beis Shammai, they had a teaching that from the first day of the week, you prepare for Shabbos. And Beis Hillel said, again, just quoting this verse from Tehillim, from Psalms, blessed be the Lord day by day, meaning you don't necessarily have to prepare, kind of take it day by day, which is a fascinating thing, and we'll have to understand what each of these positions. But what we have is Shammai saying that we should remember Shabbos every day, and again, it doesn't actually quote the verse that we're dealing with. Rashi seems to be making that connection, but we have Shammai saying that he would every day he would eat in honor of Shabbos, and Hillel saying no, just like kind of trusting God that he'll get you something in time for Shabbos, but you don't have to always be putting things aside. Okay. Before we come back to Rashi, I just want to mention a fascinating idea that is shared by Rav Shlomo Yosef Zevin, and it relates actually to Hanukkah. And we'll just say it quickly. It's kind of technical, but I think it's worth mentioning. Rav Zevin develops a theory in an essay that of course we have many debates between Hillel and Shammai throughout, and their students throughout the Talmud and the Mishnah, and not every single one is necessarily related, but it's logical that each one takes their positions because they are driven by a certain perspective on things, right? And so one person has one perspective, the other one has another perspective, or one school has one perspective, the other one a different one. And that will manifest itself in many areas of Jewish law of taking up one position versus another. In general, we see that Beis Shammai is stricter, but not always. And Beis Hillel is often more lenient. So he ends up, again, there's steps to get here, and it's a little bit more technical and deep than I'm just presenting it briefly now. But Rav Zevin suggests that you can find a pattern throughout many of the debates between Hillel and Shammai, that Shammai is often focused on the potential of something, while Hillel is looking at something sort of at face value. This actually relates to Hanukkah. He relates it to Hanukkah because there's a famous dispute between Shammai, the house of Shammai, and the house of Hillel when it comes to Hanukkah about how we should light our Hanukkah candles. The position of Beis Shammai is that on the first night you should light 8 candles, the second night 7, third night 6, going down all the way to 1 on the final night of Hanukkah. And the position of Beis Hillel is that on the first night you light 1, and then 2, and then 3, etc. And that's the position that we follow. We usually follow the opinion of Beis Hillel, and you go up. What is behind this dispute? So the Talmud, the Gemara tells us some ideas, but Rav Zevin kind of wants to delve a little bit deeper even, and he says that what they are arguing about is whether you look at the potential in something or you look at what you have at face value. In other words, Beis Shammai says that we should light 8 the first night because the first night there were 8 days of miracle potential still in the candles that first night, right? The miracle was that the lights lasted for 8 nights. That means on the first night, there was the potential within the oil to last for 8 nights. And so we should light 8 candles the first night. The second night, there was only 7 days of potential miracle within the oil. So we should light 7, and then 6, and then 5, etc., all the way down to 1. Looking at what was the potential within the oil. Beis Hillel says that we look at what we have in front of us. The first night we had 1 night of miracle, so we should light 1. The second night was now 2 nights of miracle. We should light 2. Third night 3, etc. And we're not looking at what the potential miracle is, but what actual miracle we witnessed at that point. That's how he explains sort of the deeper debate between Shammai and Hillel. And he suggests that this debate that they're having here about how to prepare for Shabbos also relates to this. Actually, I'll tell you before we get to that, one other Shabbos-related dispute that we find, which is that there is a dispute, I didn't put it on the source sheet, between Shammai and Hillel about the proper language for the blessing we make on the candle at Havdalah. So at Havdalah, when Shabbos is over, we make a blessing over a fire. It commemorates the fire that was created for the first time by Adam Harishon on the first Motzei Shabbos, the first Saturday night. He created fire, and we commemorate that with our Havdalah candle at the end of Shabbos. And there's a discussion between Shammai and Hillel as to what the blessing should be. We do it like Hillel. Hillel says it should be Borei Me'orei Ha'esh. God creates Me'orei Ha'esh, lights of fire. And Shammai says the blessing is Bara Ma'or Ha'esh. He created the light of fire in the singular. So Hillel is he creates lights of fire, and Shammai is he created the light of fire in singular. So what is it? What are they arguing about? Why would it be one over the other? So Reb Zevin, really quoting from the Gra, the Vilna Gaon, Reb Zevin says that that the Gemara actually tells us a little bit. The Gemara says that the students of Beis Hillel said to Beis Shammai, every fire has many lights within it. That you look at, there's different colors, there's different shades within a fire. So it should be in plural. The lights of the fire, it shouldn't be in singular. And that's what they're arguing about. Now the Gemara actually says that they're not arguing about whether to use present tense or past tense. They're only arguing about this. They're arguing about whether it should be, you should say the lights of fire in plural or in singular. Okay, that's what they're arguing about. So the Vilna Gaon says that, what do we mean they're not arguing about whether to use past tense or present tense? It says that they're arguing about that too. Beis Hillel says you say present tense, Borei Me'orei Ha'esh, he creates lights of fire. And Shammai says you use past tense, he created. So why does it say they're not arguing about that? So the Vilna Gaon says what it means is that that's kind of secondary to what they're arguing about. They're really arguing here about is what are we referencing when we make a blessing on fire and when we commemorate the creation of fire from that first Saturday night of creation. Shammai holds that we're referencing the potential of fire. We're thanking God for the concept of fire. And we're saying that God created the concept of fire. So it's past tense, and it's referring to that the origin of fire, what that was created on the first night. But it's singular because we're not referring to the different flickers and the different shades that we see. We're just referring to fire in general. So that's why it's in singular. While Beis Hillel is saying the blessing is for the fire that's in front of us. Right? Yes, we're commemorating the fire that was created on that first Saturday night, but we're expressing it and thanking God for the fire that we now have right in front of us. And so it's in present tense. He continues to create fire, and it's in plural because it's the fire that we're seeing right now, the flickering fire that takes on different shades, all the different shades. So again, he says, you see that Shammai is kind of focused on the potential of fire that God created originally. Hillel is focused on what's in front of us right now, which is we have a fire in front of us. So this fire has different shades. So it's in the present tense, and it's expressed as in plural as the lights of the fire. And so coming back to our discussion. So here they're arguing about how to prepare for Shabbos, how to honor the Shabbos. And Shammai is saying, I honor Shabbos every day. I honor Shabbos every day when I eat, because every day I find something good, and I say this is for Shabbos. But then if I find something better, then I eat the first thing in honor of Shabbos, that I can save the second thing. So I'm honoring Shabbos. So says Rav Zevin, that's because Shammai looks at the potential in something. And since ultimately my eating right now will bring out honor to Shabbos later, because I'm eating the food that's not as good now in order to honor the Shabbos later. So latent in my action, in my eating, is honoring Shabbos, because there's the potential there to bring out honor to Shabbos come Shabbos in a few days from now. And so right now I'm already honoring the Shabbos. While Hillel looks at, what am I doing? I'm not actually, I can't honor Shabbos when it's not Shabbos. It's Tuesday. So Hillel looks at the act itself, and he says, you can't call that honoring Shabbos unless it's Shabbos. You can only honor Shabbos on Shabbos, Hillel says. And so he doesn't consider that honoring the Shabbos to eat something on Tuesday, so that I can now create the potential to be able to eat something on something else on Shabbos. So Hillel takes a different position and doesn't consider that honoring the Shabbos, and continues to maintain that he'll just have faith in God that something will come his way. So again, a little bit of a technical idea. He has many, many examples, a whole essay on it, but I think it's just it was interesting to me. So we're really not going to go too much in that direction. I want to pose the following question. When we have a dispute between Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai, the house of Hillel and Shammai, so who do we generally rule like? So the answer is we generally rule like the house of Hillel. Now in this case, which interpretation, what does Rashi say is the interpretation of Zachor es Yom HaShabbos, remember the Shabbos? So Rashi says, coming back to our verse, remember the Shabbos, Rashi says, how do you remember it? You remember it daily, every day, by if something good comes along, setting aside for Shabbos. If something good comes along, setting aside for Shabbos. So which position is this? Which position is Rashi adopting? Whose interpretation is he offering to explain the simple meaning of this verse? And it seems it's the position of Beis Shammai. And so the Ramban is bothered by this Rashi. The Ramban says, this is not the halacha. This is not how we rule. We don't rule like Beis Shammai. He says, first of all, this opinion is mentioned in a different midrash, but it's just a single opinion there. And he says, furthermore, that's not how we rule, because this is the position of Beis Shammai and of Shammai, and not of Hillel and the students of Hillel. And so the Ramban doesn't like this interpretation of Rashi, because it seems that Rashi is following the opinion of Beis Shammai. So this is the question posed by the Ramban, and different commentaries resolve it with the approach that really, in fact, Hillel agrees to Shammai. And this was something unique to Hillel, that he didn't conduct himself that way. But for everybody else, in this regard, Hillel would say, for everybody else, we should do exactly as Shammai suggests. So it's explaining a couple of different ways. But I'll tell you first what the Kasav Sofer quotes from his father, the Chasam Sofer of Moshe Sofer. So the Chasam Sofer says that really, if you read the passage in the Talmud carefully, it says that Hillel had a different trait. Hillel the elder had a different trait, that all his actions were for the sake of heaven. So what that means is, the way he says it is that he was able to eat sitting. He could sanctify anything, basically. He sits down to a meal on Tuesday, and how do you enrich, how do you enhance and infuse that meal with holiness? So if one keeps in mind that what they are eating, l'shem shamayim, for the sake of heaven, then that meal takes on a whole different tone. I'm eating so that I have strength to be a better servant of God, to be able to go and do mitzvahs. That was the level that Hillel was on, that he could do that. He could sit down at any meal So he didn't have to apply a different mitzvah, eat in honor of Shabbos. He was already elevating his eating because, as it says, he had this different trait that everything he did was l'shem shamayim, was for the sake of heaven. Others say a similar idea that the Gemara elsewhere talks about how Hillel had many guests and he would share his food with the poor. So that's how he elevated his meals. So he didn't need to elevate and enhance his weekday meals by doing them in honor of Shabbos, because he already enhanced and infused them with holiness in other ways, either with a clear focus that everything he did was for the sake of heaven, or with because he shared with the poor, etc. But says the Chassam Sofer, that was Hillel. As it says, he had a different trait. That was something unique to him and maybe to his students. But Beis Shammai didn't hold himself to be on that level, and so he had a different way of infusing his meal with holiness. And says the Chassam Sofer, for most of us, that's probably the way to go. The easier path, if we want to infuse our meals with holiness, we should adapt this way, which is that eat for the sake of Shabbos. Say, I'm eating this today, and really you could do it with any meal of the week, right? As long as it's not better than what we're going to have on Shabbos, right? I'm having pasta for lunch today. I'm having this for lunch today because I'm saving the good stuff for Shabbos, right? And that enhances, that infuses, it means that by our eating on, I keep saying Tuesday, might as well say Wednesday. On Wednesday at lunchtime, I can infuse my meal with holiness. I get doing it in honor of Shabbos because I'm eating this because I'm saving the good stuff for Shabbos. The other way that some present it is that what was unique about Hillel was his level of trust in God. Meaning, this is quoted by the Mishnah Berurah, which is a halachic commentary, a commentary in Jewish law. The Mishnah Berurah quotes from earlier sources, and he says, really, Hillel agrees to Beis Shammai that that's the way to go, to keep saving, keep preparing for Shabbos, set one thing aside, and always be setting aside and thinking about saving the best stuff for Shabbos. But Hillel, he also was working on his bitachon, his faith in God. And so he, on his own way, had this kind of, I don't know what to call it, this test that he would do, and he would work on his own bitachon, his own trust in God, that God would provide him with something before, something good before Shabbos to honor the Shabbos. But somebody who's not on that level of Hillel, on that level of faith, that can say, oh, I trust God by Friday afternoon, I'm going to have something delicious for Shabbos. So the rest of us who are not on that level of faith, we're to do like Shammai. We're to do like Shammai and make sure we set things aside to make sure we have something for Shabbos. And he says, certainly if we come across something special that's hard, rare, not easy to get our hands on, something special for Shabbos, we should grab the opportunity to get it and to save it for Shabbos, rather than miss out on that chance. So, but what we have at the end of the day here is a very beautiful thing, which is that we could really be preparing for Shabbos all the time and every day without actually preparing in a certain way, right? Because we're by saving the best and realizing that we're saving the best for Shabbos, we're actually preparing for Shabbos if we think about it that way, and we're honoring Shabbos that way, and that's a way of bringing Shabbos into the whole week, of Zachoros Yom Shabbos, remembering Shabbos throughout the week, is by thinking about things in that way, by reminding ourselves, because we do this, we do save the best for Shabbos, but we don't necessarily think about it during the week. It's just maybe automatic. But by reminding ourselves that I'm having this today because it's not Shabbos, and I'm saving the better stuff for Shabbos, my favorites for Shabbos. So that actually infuses every meal with a special holiness, and it means that we are honoring Shabbos throughout the week. Okay. Now, the most practical application of Zachoras Yom HaShabbos L'Kadsho, remember the Shabbos to sanctify it, is based on the Gemara, the Talmud in Pesachim, which says it means Zochreyu al Hayayin, remember it over wine, which refers to Kiddush, sanctifying the Shabbos. And so Zachor, we often attribute, because of this, we associate it with positive mitzvos on Shabbos itself, positive commandments, while Shamor, which is the flip side, and the other set of 10 commandments would be guard the Shabbos, would deal with the prohibitions, guarding, refraining from certain things on Shabbos. But Zachor, remember the Shabbos. The Gemara says, how do we remember the Shabbos? We remember it over wine. And so what that means is that this is actually the positive commandment of making Kiddush on Shabbos. And the way it's presented is to do it over wine. So just to get a little bit of the background here. So what this really means is that we have a commandment to acknowledge, Zachoras Yom HaShabbos means we are to acknowledge the holiness and the specialness of Shabbos at the onset of Shabbos. Now, most opinions, almost all opinions, are that the idea of doing it over wine is rabbinic. The Torah's commandment is just to say and state the special holiness of Shabbos. We fulfill the Torah commandment of Kiddush, of sanctifying the Shabbos, by just declaring that Shabbos is special, Shabbos is holy, Shabbos is different than the rest of the week. However, the sages enacted that it should be best done over wine. And so the rabbinic commandment would be to specifically make Kiddush over wine, right? L'Kadisho means to sanctify it, and that's to be done over wine. Wine makes something significant, it makes something special. And the truth is that there's actually another dispute between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel regarding the order of the blessings at Kiddush, because we end up with two blessings at Kiddush. One is the blessing over wine, Borei Pri Hagafen, and right, like any food that we eat, we make a blessing before. And then there's another blessing, which is the blessing of Kiddush, the blessing Mikadesh Shabbos. God sanctifies the Shabbos. The way that we sanctify the Shabbos is through a blessing, and the way that we do it practically is like the opinion of Beis Hillel, which is that we first make the Borei Pri Hagafen, and right. So the way we do it, we begin with some verses. That we quote some verses from the end of the creation when Shabbos comes, and then we say the blessing, Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam Borei Pri Hagafen, and then we say the blessing for Shabbos, which ends Baruch Atah Hashem Mekadesh HaShabbos, that God sanctifies the Shabbos. So we first say the Hagafen on the wine, and then we say Mekadesh HaShabbos. According to Beis Shammai, though, actually, it's to be done in the opposite order. We're supposed to first make the blessing on the Kiddush, Mekadesh HaShabbos, and only after that make the blessing of Borei Pri Hagafen. What would the root of this dispute be? What are they arguing about? So Reb Zevin suggests that, again, he ties it into the overall dispute, but it's not going to sound really related to what we were discussing before, but that Beis Shammai is an idealist, and maybe Beis Hillel is maybe a more practical, and what Beis Shammai is expressing, in an ideal world, a person comes to Shabbos, and they're so excited by Shabbos, they're so inspired by Shabbos, and they, as a result of blessing, sanctifying the Shabbos, they say, let's drink to that. And so you start by recognizing the beauty of Shabbos and the specialness and the oneg, the delight of Shabbos. And you want to express that with a party, with a toast, with over wine. And so the blessing on the wine follows the blessing of Shabbos. That would be ideal, that we could come into Shabbos that way, and just from Shabbos itself want to make a toast to Shabbos, so to speak. Beis Hillel is maybe more of a realist. Beis Hillel says that might be ideal, but most people need to do it in the opposite order. Most people need to start with some wine. Start with a blessing on the wine, and that will bring them towards the excitement and the holiness of Shabbos, right? With Shabbos, we have this idea of oneg Shabbos, of delighting in Shabbos, of enjoying Shabbos. So according to this approach, the idea of oneg Shabbos, of enjoying Shabbos, is we delight in Shabbos, and that will hopefully bring us actually towards a recognition of how great Shabbos is on a more conceptual level, on a spiritual level. But we maybe start with the physical, we start with the wine, and we build on that towards the spiritual. So that's why Beis Hillel says start with the blessing on the wine, start with the Bari Pri Hagafen, and go from there, build up towards when you're excited to at the joys, the delights of Shabbos. So then you're ready to sanctify Shabbos and declare how special Shabbos is. So the Zachor, in this case, Zachor es Yom HaShabbos L'Kadsho, we are to remember Shabbos, to sanctify it. That's done according to the sages, the most, and this is again the most practical halachic, in Jewish law takeaway, is because this is the actual mitzvah. Everything we mentioned before is textual interpretation of the commentaries. There's no actual practical mitzvah in halacha that we would say that you have to do it. It's definitely ideal, to remember Shabbos throughout the week and count towards Shabbos and save your food for Shabbos. That's all important and all true. But the practical, where do we have an actual, how is ultimately the commandment interpreted in Jewish law is in this way, that it's to make Kiddush. And as I mentioned, the Torah law is fulfilled, the Torah commandment of Kiddush, of sanctifying the Shabbos, is fulfilled without wine. Kiddush means sanctifying. To sanctify the Shabbos, it actually leads to all sorts of questions about whether you fulfill it already if you pray the evening service, Ma'ariv, and you already mentioned, the holiness of Shabbos there. Perhaps we've already fulfilled our Torah commandment, and when we come home, we're just trying to for those who actually, some people didn't pray, that also makes things interesting. Some people have prayed the evening prayers, some people haven't yet, some people still have a Torah obligation of Kiddush because they haven't prayed yet, some have only a rabbinic obligation to do it over wine. But ultimately, we have a Torah obligation to mention the holiness of Shabbos at the beginning. And I should mention that according to the Rambam, according to Maimonides, and others, this obligation to remember the Shabbos is not only at the beginning of Shabbos, it's also at the end of Shabbos. The Havdalah that we make at the end of Shabbos, when we declare the difference between Shabbos and the weekday, according to the Rambam, it's part of this commandment, Zachor es Yom HaShabbos, remember the Shabbos. We're to remember the Shabbos by Torah law at the end of Shabbos to declare the unique holiness of Shabbos versus the week that we're now entering. So Zachor es Yom HaShabbos has implication both at the beginning of Shabbos, remember the Shabbos at the beginning, and remembering at the end, make sure to mention that Shabbos is different than the week that we're about to enter. And in both cases, though, the idea of doing it over wine is that's a rabbinic addition, according to most, there are some who hold it's biblical, but most hold that it's rabbinic, and but still definitely an important and essential part of the mitzvah of Zachar Yom Shabbos, remembering the Shabbos. Okay, we'll hold that.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you,
You
Rabbi.
are
Thank
welcome.
you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yosh Tov.
Thank you very much.